I want to start off and say that I know a lot of people came from a very long ways or made personal sacrifices, missing work when times were tough. I really appreciate everyone who showed a lot of effort to come here and sacrifice the way that my father had sacrificed for me and my family over the years, and I really appreciate everything you guys did by coming. And I know he appreciates it too. And I have a couple of words to say about him and his life. I also have a couple of verses that I picked up that I think would be appropriate for the event. What are you asking? Louder, okay. If I could sum up Patrick's 55 years on this earth in one word, it would be family. His true heroism will never be seen on his tombstone or in records of his accomplishments left behind, like his job title and things of that nature. Someone 20 years from now, never heard of him, could look him up and not see anything special on paper. No big college, no massive job, and that's the way he would have wanted it. My father wasn't one to make a fuss or find the need for spotlight. Success was not the drive of his life. Doing what it took for the ones he dearly loved was what he was all about. And it was never about the credit. He was the type of man to make a donation and make sure it said anonymous. I know when I was very small, he had just gotten his job at Parkside, and I was very little. My mother and him were just married, and they had a small apartment, and they couldn't even put together the money for paper towels. And there was a promotion coming down the pike at Parkside, and it was between him and another worker. And he needed the money, but he gave it to the other worker because he felt it was right. And that's who he was. He was the most selfless man I ever met. You know, it wasn't about success. It wasn't about himself. It was about doing what was right. The best way to describe him, or at least the way I'd like to, is a household hero. He excelled best in the stories that never got told. He was the man to break his back for you, get you out of a jam, and then never tell a soul to protect your honor. I'm sure a lot of you here have a story where Pat stepped in and helped you with a delicate matter, got you through it, and then never told a soul, and made sure that whatever happened stayed between you and him. So he may not have gotten the credit for everything he did, but he earns everyone's respect, one person at a time. He was a man to be trusted. My father gave everything for his family, and he showed me firsthand what it meant to love a woman the right way and what it meant to treat her with respect. When I was very young in kindergarten, a girl smacked me because I didn't know any better. I just hit her back in an impulse. Let's just say my father taught me a lesson I'd never forget, which was never hit a woman. He was strong by his values and even stronger by the way he lived by them. The right thing was always the right thing, and there were no exceptions. My father gave everything for his family, and when he had nothing left, he gave double. He showed me the true meaning of being a father and a provider for a family, not by talk but by example. He never complained, he never cried, he just got it done. Those who knew my father will know his love for John Wayne movies, which he shared with his mother, Kathleen, and all of his brothers and sister. I think those movies, he watched them so much, he became John Wayne in real life. He was without question John Wayne as a father and husband. He got the job done. He never cried. He never showed fear or pain, and he never took any credit. He did what needed to be done, and he was a great man for himself and for the people that he loved, but not for the world to stand up and praise him. I heard a story recently that in his place of work, he was never one to gossip, to harp on one's weakness for entertainment or to one-up himself like everybody would do in a competitive environment. He never spoke bad about anyone, or never spoke behind their back, and was a man you could trust and rely on. And these were things that were said to me by people who worked with him every day. And It made me look back on the 30 years that I knew him and realize I thought as hard as I could at one time where he gossiped or talked behind someone's back or did any of that kind of things. And I looked as hard as I could and I could not find one instance. At that minute I started to cry. It was so much his normal behavior that I never noticed. I just came to expect it over the years. And then I realized the most beautiful thing I could possibly learn about my father. At that moment, my chest puffed out, and I was as proud as I could be that I was that man's son. Then I realized how many other amazing things I must have not have noticed over the years because they were normal. How many extraordinary things. He was such a great man, you just came to expect it, and you just didn't notice it. My father was tough as nails. He could be the nicest puppy on the planet and the fiercest Rottweiler in the pack if you stepped out of line with someone he cared about. He commanded respect, and he was not afraid to speak his mind and tell what you needed to hear when you needed to hear it. You could count on him if someone hurt you, that they would not get away with it. He stood up for himself and his family and was not afraid to even throw fists to protect the honor and safety of those he loved. Growing up, I always thought my father was the toughest man in the world, and I felt like the safest kid in the world. When I was in preschool, my teacher asked this question to me: what's 2 + 2 equal? And my answer was, any teacher that doesn't know that is stupid. So immediately I was suspended from pre-K. When my father came up to see what was going on and he heard the story, his answer was, well, my son is right, what's the problem? When I was in high school, a group of kids did some serious things to the school that were wrong. And somehow I was set up to take the fall. My father marched in there like an attorney, and by the end, the right kids got the blame, and the school gave me and my family a full apology. I could count on him in any jam. One day, the angriest I ever saw him, though, a truck driver disrespected my mother. And let's say I had to hold my father back as hard as I could. He loved my mother with every part of him. He would not tolerate anybody saying an unkind word or making an unkind gesture. Well, I've covered his amazing integrity and character, but he was also one of the most fun people to be around. I remember sharing a Yankee game. I'll always remember sharing a Yankee game, a steak dinner, and him with a Coors Light near. Every day my father was involved in my life. There was never a day he missed. My father's greatest imprint left, I believe, in my opinion, was the work he did for Rich Haven Little League. He coached all my baseball teams growing up. I must have played for 10 to 15 years. It was a lot of coaching. He had 15 kids on a kid. He had schedules. He had to call them up. This was really before cell phones and text messages, so this was calling each one. And he would drive them back and forth. He would make sure they all show up. He'd make sure that they got home. And later on, he became a board member, and he helped raise money for the league. And it's easy to forget at that age that he's doing all this for you despite his high-stress job, which he really did have a very high-stress job. And he would spend all of his nights doing that, and waking up at 5 in the morning, and going to work, and doing stuff like we are here today, which is not easy work to do at all. My father was always concerned with all the kids on the team, and made a point to not single me out at all and make me stand out in any way. It was important for me to learn what being on a team meant. And it was important for me to understand that I would receive no special favor. so that all the other kids on the team would understand that it was a team. And there were always 15 other parents that would remind him of that constantly. So he always had his hands full. There was one particular kid that I will not name, but I want to bring up his story. This one child came from a family where it was somewhat difficult for them to come to the games or help him in any way. I believe people put together money for him to play. So my father would drive him to all of the games and drive him home. And every time after a game there would be food and all the other kids would be eating. My father would buy him dinner every single time. And one year this kid did not show up after many years. It was found out to be that he could not afford the next season. So my father made some calls, talked to some people, and made sure that this kid showed up with a uniform and everything he needed paid so he could play. My father cared about every single one of those kids that he coached like they were his own kid. He would worry about it all the time, his lineups, any kind of personal problems they would have, anything going on with the families. He was always very concerned for them. And I was very proud of that. And there were a lot of parents that did not want that job, and he took it. And despite that, sometimes they didn't treat him very well, and he still did it. I think I covered everything from this part. So the next part would be, if my father was here right now, I can guarantee his most important worry would be everybody else in this room. It would not be him. Wherever he is, he's worried that everyone is crying and how everyone's doing, and he'd want to make sure everything was okay and everyone was all right. So I'd like to say a couple of verses from the Bible that I hope might help some people find some peace about everything with him. I chose 3 in particular. I have some thank yous to give to a lot of people who were very kind to me and my family. So just give me a second to locate it. First thing is Joshua chapter 1 verse 9. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. I know if my father was here, he would not want anyone in any fear of what happened, anyone to be discouraged. As I told you from everything that I've written, I have no doubt in my heart, wherever he is in a wonderful place. He went out of his way for everybody. He never wanted any credit. He never wanted any special treatment. And what he did for me and my mother, even to the last days, he was not well. He was going through health issues. He was working as hard as he could. Nothing was more important to him than us. So I'd like to share with you one more, which is on that topic. Revelation chapter 14, verse 13. Then I heard a voice from heaven say, Right blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, they will rest from their labor, for their deeds will now follow them. The one thing that has comforted me the most is that he can finally rest, because he worked so hard. My mother had not been well for a long time. There were many nights he would work, and he would come home, he would take care of her, he would cook, and then he would go to bed and do it all over again. And there were a lot of times this would go by. One time in particular, my mother had broken her leg and was in a hospital bed for 2 years. That's 2 years of going to work, paying all the bills, cooking, cleaning, shopping, and raising a son. Never complained once. The final Bible verse I'd like to leave you guys with is Ephesians chapter 5, verse 28. In the same way husbands show their love for their wives as their own bodies, he who loves his wife loves himself. And I think that best puts my father. The reflection of who he was the way he treated my mother. And I think everyone here would definitely recognize that over the years. Not once did he ever say an ill word about her, disrespect her in public, ever yell at her. She could do no wrong, always in his eyes. I'd like to say a lot of thank yous to a lot of people that stepped up and really helped. I was very fortunate that my father worked in the funeral industry. So he practically took care of his own funeral for me. Still, after death, taking care of his family. By his kindness to others, a lot of people wanted to run in and step up and make sure Pat had the best funeral possible. So I'd like to thank some of these people. Some of the people that donated were Abigail Press. They donated prayer cards and a nameplate. In particular, Jeff Gaines. Hedgecock Florist did a wonderful job on the flowers that we ordered from my mother and me, and for not much of a charge did an extra special job just because he loved my father. Majestic Funeral Home, in particular, Robert Mastranfana. Of course, Welsh and Labella Funeral Home, where we are now. Peter Labella grew up with my father. This funeral home had a lot of meaning to him. He grew up with the Labella family, used to eat dinners over at their house, and they owned a funeral home. And hanging out with Pete and being around the funeral business is what made him choose to take up the funeral business as what he would do for the rest of his life. So I felt it was fitting that the viewing be here at Labella, and they donated here for free in my dad's honor. And I thank Peter and his son James, and also George Chris, who's staying the night here and working here for no cost. And I can't thank you guys enough. J&R Casket Company. There was Jerry, Tina, Leon, and Chris donated a casket because of how many times they dealt with my father, and he was just that wonderful to them that they wanted to do something nice for him. This is a list of who my father was. These aren't small gifts, these are huge gifts, and all these people wanted to do it for him. Parkside Memorial Chapels, where he worked for most of his life, donated the hearse. They're running the funeral for free. They're directing the funeral for free, all in tribute to him. Blair Mazzarella, in particular James D'Onofrio. He did the rosary beads, the crucifix, and all the symbolic work. I'd like to thank the funeral directors who spent a lot of hours on the phone making sure everything went okay, making sure that everything was taken care of. Once again, no charge, out of friendship. David Goldstein, his brother Jordan Goldstein, my father's boss for many, many years, Eddie Goldstein, and his wife Cheryl. The funeral director tomorrow was one of my dad's best friends. It's an honor to me that he is directing the funeral. His name is Sal Prestigiacomo. Sal had a serious heart condition. My father, he had to miss work, and my father was so worried. He'd call him all the time. I'm so glad that Sal's able to do it. Other friends of his that helped, Max Leibowitz, Jeff Lawrence, Ruth Rizzani, Louise Aragoma, James D'Onofrio, Peter Labella. Suzanne Kipperman helped us understand, told us the story of which urn he picked when he was working there. So that was a big deal. Jay Solson, Ronald Dunn, Donald Scordino, and John Christman. Now for some personal thank yous. During the toughest time that we went through, I was lucky enough that not only everybody from his job wanted to step up and help, practically everybody on the planet wanted to step up and help. I want to thank in particular my Uncle Danny. He made sure to give me a list every day to make sure I did not forget one thing for this funeral. I want to thank my Uncle Mike, who reached out to Blessed Sacrament and made sure that my father had the proper priest and had the church, and it was done at the time and day that we needed it. Because of the holidays, it was no small favor. I want to thank my Uncle Brian and Aunt Lucy, who came by and made sure that my mom was able to be ready for this event, that she looked good. During a difficult time, it was the biggest of favors. And I want to thank my Aunt Lizzie, who came all the way from Florida, who's cannot just easily miss work, who, believe me, gave everything she could to come here. And I know that. And I appreciate my dad's brothers and sister. He'd be proud of you all. You did a lot for us. And most of all, I'd also like to thank my Uncle Charles, who paid for the lovely dinner we just had, to make sure that my father was celebrated, that's what an Irish funeral is all about, and that's what he wanted. It shouldn't be about the last moments, it should be about the celebration of the years before. All the years he was around. I was very fortunate when this first happened. I was very sad. And I looked on Facebook and I saw the overwhelming response, photos that I'd never seen. Everybody just dying to write comments about this man. Everything good. And that moment I realized, why am I upset? This is my time to pay tribute to my father. For a man who never got the credit he deserved or asked for it on this planet, this is the time I should be smiling and happy that he's going to get his due. And most important, he's going to get a rest. Because he worked as hard as he could for me and my mother, and I'll never forget it. And now that time is over. And he can finally rest. Something he never did in the 30 years that I knew him. I have one last very important thank you, and then I'm going to leave you all with an Irish blessing, and that's going to be it for today. Now, Father Frank is coming. He should be coming later to give a speech towards the end. There's been one person, of course, that I cannot forget, that the only reason I'm standing up here calm and making sense is my new fiancée, Leah. My father had met Leah and was so happy in my choice. He really thought that this time that I'd gotten it right and that I met somebody who would really take good care of me. And now, after what has just happened, that becomes very important. And in this week, she proved him right so many times. She took so much on herself, helped us with everything we had to do, and she would refuse to cry because she didn't want to get me upset. She took a lot on herself, never complained. I've never seen anyone take care of me or be that good to me, maybe other than this man right here. And I cannot thank you enough. And her family who came all the way here from New Jersey, thank you. I'd like to leave you all with one last blessing. And I'd like to thank everybody once again for coming. And of course, I can't find it because I've been unorganized my entire life, which my father is probably pointing out right now. Okay. I'm going to leave you all with an Irish blessing. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am thousands of winds that blow. I am the diamond glints in the snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you waken in the morning's hest, I am the swift uplifting rush of gentle birds in circling flight. I am the soft star that shines at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry, because I am not there, because I did not die. Thank you everyone for coming, showing my father all the wonderful respect and wonderful comments, and I was not expecting this kind of tribute to him. On Facebook, here, everywhere, you guys made me the proudest son on the face of the earth, and I thank you all. Thank you.